We apparently had a number of broken chairs that were set aside to be repaired. They have been removed and placed out here in the audience. If your chair is wobbling, if you feel there's anything funky about your chair, swap it out for a better one, or at least place it somewhere where we know that it's a broken chair to be repaired after the meeting.
You've got an umbrella policy though, right?
You know, I don't think an umbrella is going to help you in the fall.
Good to see you. Great.
By my time, it is 5:31. Are we ready to go? We are ready to go technically, so I'd like to call this meeting of the Optional Forms of County Government Study Commission to order. Yes.
Can you do a sound check, make sure online can hear us?
Okay. Can you hear us online? Hello?
Anybody?
Dave? Kristen? Can anyone hear us? If they can hear us, I can't hear them, Nancy.
Looks like you're famous.
Can anyone hear us? Dave, Kristen? Anybody?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, there it is.
so what is Matilda?
She is an old English sheepdog with a haircut.
Do they know we can hear them?
We have.
She's been sheared.
Hello, ladies.
That's her summer dew. Oh, yeah. But when, in the winter, they'll let it get longer.
Yeah, we're not hearing anything from the meeting yet. Let's see what else they're saying.
We can hear you, Sherry.
Can you hear us, Sherry?
Meeting room is the only thing we're not hearing from.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting.
Sherry,
sitting
Kristen,
next-
David?
Oh, I
I wanted to sit over here because I
you.
didn't want to miss what was
You can hear us?
Perfect.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Now they can hear them.
Right.
We're squared away? Nancy, are we squared away?
Oh, do you want me to go get her leash? You know where it is?
Can you understand us now? Nancy, Dave, Kristen?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
that's it. Close the windows, open the windows. Bob, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Chris and I will mute.
Yeah, I'm gonna mute also. I'll set the pledge in mute, so, yeah.
Okay, ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any changes to the agenda?
I have a question. Why is it being amended? What's being amended? It says amended at the top.
It does, let's see. Nancy, can you answer that? What's being amended?
Oh.
Do we take approval of the minutes off?
The date of the approval
Brian?
is August 8th and have been amended to September 8th,
Ah,
the actual meeting date.
good enough.
Okay.
Tamara, is that good enough?
Yep.
Okay. So approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, Bob Fish has moved. Second?
Second.
Second, Phil Ward. Take a vote. Approve. Minutes are approved. I'm sorry, the agenda is approved. Are there any announcements? Move to the minutes, approval of the minutes for September 8th. Has everyone had a chance to look at that? Any issues with the?
I did not have a chance to look at it, but I won't hold things up.
Okay, Kurt?
Move to approve.
Okay, Bob Fish moves to approve the minutes.
I second.
Tamara moves to approve, second that. Approve the minutes, vote. Passed. We have no reports that I'm aware of, no old business. So we move straight to the interview with current Kootenai County Sheriff Robert Norris. Bob, if you would like to make an opening statement?
I would. Thank you very much. To compete with my elected official assessor, I'd like to bring you from the medieval time of the office of sheriff to the, can't hear very well, the medieval time as office of the sheriff to the post-medieval time and to Sir Robert Peel and to today. We should be here about 4 days. Is that?
Sure, 4 days
Okay.
sounds good.
So,
Just a quick one, Bob.
yes.
Last I heard, we still had a problem with the speakers in that part of the room, so you'll have to speak up a little so they can hear you.
Can everybody hear me? No. No? All right. I'll do my best.
Thank you, Bob. Can you hold the microphone?
Will that help? Yeah. So I would like to start off with a quick disclaimer. If I make reference to he or she or they or them, it does not necessarily mean that I am speaking about the current Board of Commissioners. It could be the current or the past. So if I accidentally make a reference to a particular pronoun, it does not mean the current existing commissioners. It could or could mean somebody from the past. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, and the citizens of Kootenai County. I will not take your valuable time to tell you how elected offices, and specifically the office of sheriff, has served other governments for centuries, and here in Idaho for about 130 years. I am not in favor of making any of our current elected officials appointed or accountable to a county manager.
Hold that down. Give the man a chance to speak.
I guess I don't have to read that one again. I was going to, but I guess I don't have to. This is a checks and balances system that has been in place for over a century. An elected official provides necessary dialogue and oversight to commissioners. Each department, as it pertains to the needs of their department, brings trust and confidence to local government. I am wondering about one question that persists as I monitor these meetings on YouTube and in person is, what is it that has brought us here today that is so significantly broken that a different form of government would fix? I do not see a significant problem with elected department heads that would significantly improve local government if they were appointed. I actually believe it would make things not as efficient. An elected department head can talk about the current and future needs of a department without fear of retaliation. An elected official can refuse an inappropriate or questionable direction from any other politician or elected office. Mayors, city managers, more of your city government structure, they have the ability to apply pressure and have leverage to make employees do what they want them to do. Elected sheriffs do not have that concern. So I do have a question based on my observations, and I don't mean to offend anybody by this question. However, Is this more about improving local government or a personal grievance that some members of this commission or their spouse has with the current leadership of the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee?
We didn't elect a puppet.
From monitoring these meetings, I will talk about a case that can be made that the problem is not with the elected department heads, but maybe a closer look with the office of commissioner. So in evaluating and watching some of these proceedings, I don't hear the word to make government more efficient often. But what I do hear is about control. And I hear control and I'm just a little bit concerned that instead of making government more efficient, which should be the overall message or theme, I constantly hear this word control. And I'm just a little bit concerned with that. I also go to many public forums in which some of our commissioners go to. And I am constantly reminded by some of these commissioners that they have the power of the purse. And it's always a little bit of that control that reminds me that, hey, we control your budget. And it's interesting, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but current interviewing techniques when you're talking to somebody is not to give them a direct question so they would answer. We want to hear what their feelings are and what their gut is telling us. We want to hear what they have to say about what their true intent is. And one of those occurred on July the 14th, when we had a commissioner that was sitting here, and this commissioner gave an example. And an example was that if we hired a county police chief, then if they don't do what we want them to do, and the example was given on the river about enforcement on the river, then we can fire them. Now, that was a very, very telling statement, because when I ask somebody a direct question, then I get a yes or no answer or very, very short answer. But when they're allowed to speak, we get what really the intent of what their feelings are and what their intent of a particular subject is. So I'm very, very concerned about the word control is used often, but the words efficient government are not. So, having said that, I know I'm going to confuse some people in this room. Is there value to a county manager? Yes, but not for the electeds to report to. But I do believe that a county of this size, there is value, which we'll talk about some of the examples about a county manager. So, to give you some examples of what I have dealt with in the last few months and spoken to former sheriff's office employees and executives, I have compiled a short list of discussion items that I'd like to discuss with you. As we all know, that it is well known that the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office has had trying times in trying to recruit and retain good deputy sheriffs. So, and quite frankly, retain employees in general. Every board from recent memory for the last 12 years has asked for a wage study. Every board in the last 12 years has decided to ignore it. So we are always in a training recruitment mode to a pretty significant degree. And we spend millions of dollars when you consider when we had about 8 officers leave in a short period of time, 8 deputy sheriffs leave in a short period of time, we spend about $150,000 on a 3-year deputy. On a 3-year deputy, we spend about $150 million or $150,000 from recruitment to you're functional, go out there and provide public safety. And there has been some people on this board that have said, so what, just hire a new one. Well, generally, deputy sheriffs and a lot of our professional staff, we are not plug and play. There is a training period that occurs in a law enforcement organization. We're not somebody, a clerk over at Walmart that can be hired and say, hey, put this over here. It is just not that type of working environment. But every board has asked for it, and every board has ignored it. Another example could be the fact that when we did our jail expansion, the construction company said, if you complete the jail at this point in time, it'll be $3.5 million. If we come back, it'll be $8 to $9 million. Now, I don't know where you can put $3.5 million and let it turn into $9 million in that short period of time. But this was a decision that was made by the Board of Commissioners not to finish it, but to come back at a later time and do it. I have had commissioners suggest that, well, why do we have to provide animal control? Well, because it's part of the Idaho Constitution that the sheriff in every 44 counties here in Idaho has to provide this. I have been asked, well, why do we have to give the inmates 2 hot meals a day? Can't we just give them 1 hot meal a day and save X amount of dollars? I said, well, if you want to go to prison, you can go ahead and do that, but we have minimum jail standards that we need to maintain. We recently, on this July the 14th interview with one of our commissioners, made reference to a $200,000 expenditure in medical costs for inmates. Well, yeah, we have to provide medical care for inmates. But during my administration, I have put protocol that I want deputy sheriff, I want command staff to look at every event that goes to the hospital. And if we can make sure that that inmate or patient gets back as soon as possible and doesn't impact the inmate's safety and health, then we need to do that. So we put eyes on every one of these. However, this was an item that on July the 14th, this commissioner felt it was necessary to bring forward in this context that we overspend our budget by $200,000. So I have no control over who gets ill, and especially in these COVID times. To give you an example, we had an inmate that, we had an individual that had a $5 warrant, or I'm sorry, $500 warrant, misdemeanor, non-violent warrant. Came in, was there for a few days, did get COVID, went to ICU, it was costing us $30,000 a day. The taxpayers, $30,000 a day. I said, here, I'll pay the $500. You know what? I go, these are types of things that I don't have any control over. Now, am I making headway to contact judges and to contact their private insurer to say, hey, this is the situation? Yes, I am. But I have to provide medical care, or we will all be paying in lawsuits. I've had commissioners tell me, well, why do you have to give inmates linen exchange X amount of times a week? Can't you just do it twice a month? I go, no, there's a public health issue here. We have to maintain the public health within our jail to include our employees. I have commissioners that once they issue a budget to me, they ask me about item expenditures in that budget, such as $9 thermometers, such as $137 medical accommodation chairs. Now, the company that we use, the county uses for their furniture, their office furniture, the chair costs $450. We found it at Costco for $137. So we purchased it from Costco at $137. And we were asked, well, why did you do that? Well, because it was significantly cheaper than if I went to our provider, to our vendor for it. To give you another idea, and these are all things that take time and consume a lot of trust between this office and the Board of Commissioners. Imagine in whatever work that you do, and I don't know what work that all of you do or did, but imagine if you were constantly over one of your employees or supervisors saying, did you do this, did you do this, do this, and this, and this. That would give that employee a sense that you don't trust him or her in their decision making. Now, these are fully trained people. I'm not talking about somebody who's got a year on the job. I'm talking about executives, department heads that have been in law enforcement for 25, 30 years. So these are some of the things that I'm constantly doing with one or more commissioners. Another example is we have transports, and we have to go pick up inmates from other counties, bring them back. And for the purpose of this conversation, let's just say that the per diem rate is $75 for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I had a transport deputy, didn't buy lunch, but it's divided into each. So you only get like $15 for breakfast, $25 for lunch, and etc. Well, this particular incident, the deputy didn't put in for lunch, but he put in for $10 more for dinner. But he was way below the $75 allowed. Was it wrong by policy? Yes. However, was it over the maximum allowed? No. But I am constantly always trying to educate some of these commissioners that, quite frankly, maybe never managed people before or is unfamiliar with what the necessities of law enforcement are when serving the public. We have had boards that have attempted to use drug forfeiture money to purchase, illegally purchase, I might add, equipment. And we cannot do that. There's only certain designated items that we can purchase, and that's it. We cannot augment our budget with these asset forfeiture dollars. Now, I had a commissioner sitting in this seat, and he made a comment about the sheriff's office and the need to spend $7,000 to make all of our doors white. Yes, I did require that. I did ask that. But why did I ask that? Because under state of Idaho versus Boehner, one of his arguments that the reason he shot at law enforcement was because he couldn't identify who the cops were, because when they drove up, they didn't have clearly marked patrol cars. Right now, we have 5 different patrol markings on our cars. We have solid black with a faint, what they call a ghost markings. We have black with yellow markings, black with silver markings, and we have black and whites. So I did that to limit the risk of the taxpayers of Kootenai County, not because I wanted to spend the $7,000. And it's also the advantages of black and white police cars. Studies have been done that the public, when they see a black and white police car, they believe they see more cars out there than if they were a solid police car. And the criminal element believes, when they see a black and white police car, that there's more black and whites than what really are out there. That's the reason why we put the doors as white. But we had a commissioner sitting right here making a suggestion that I'm overspending this money. Somebody who has no law enforcement experience. I already went through the example of the waterways, but I do have some other examples, and I'll get to those. We had a commissioner sitting here that complained about $65 shadow boxes that we give our retirees. So yeah, you provide the umbrella of freedom for 25 years. Yes, we have elected, and we've done this for years before I came here, a $65 shadow box. I won't tell you what the Coeur d'Alene Police Department does for their retirees, but it's significantly more. Now, I'd like to tell you about some of the examples of how a sheriff or an elected sheriff or position can make the case or an argument why a law enforcement officer should not be appointed. We have some interesting times that we live in right now. I'd like to bring your attention to a city in Ohio, don't recall the name, but a woman was watching her son play football in an outdoor stadium, and she was tased by a police officer for not wearing a mask. Do we remember that one? Now, do we remember seeing law enforcement officers in certain communities telling people they can't go to church while Walmart stayed open? Now, the First Amendment right clearly states that freedom of religion shall not be restricted. And sure enough, we had that occurring recently. And it's no doubt that many city managers, mayors, were given that direction to those police chiefs to do that. Now, this officer now works for the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office. The reason why he left his previous agency was because the mayor told the police chief not to cite residents who live in their city. That happened right here in Kootenai County. Hey, it's okay to enforce the law on residents who don't live in this city, but you will not enforce the law here within these city limits. Does the term justice shall be blind come to anybody's mind? But law enforcement, we don't make those distinctions. Justice is blind. I have had a situation with a mayor who believed that where he lived in his community and where his business interests were more of important than where the crime problem was in another part of the city. And I have had to have discussions with this mayor to say, hey, I duly respect your opinion on that. However, burglaries and robberies over here in this area of the city really deserve more attention than the very nice area in which you live in. And there was a period of time where it was a little contentious, but then after a period of time, he realized that, you know what, it was probably appropriate to defer the strategy of combating crime to law enforcement rather than what he believed his opinion should have been. And my last point here is, yes, on that July 14th, we did hear a commissioner say if they don't do what we want them to do, we could fire them, as an example.
That's right.
And that's concerning. That is concerning. Because what happens if there's a list to the assessor's office and says, hey, Mr. Assessor, I know you're appointed, but these 10 addresses, can you go ahead and just review those tax assessments? Now, an assessor, if he's appointed, is probably likely going to do that. But an assessor who is elected saying, whoa, 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 come here. No, that's not how this works. You know, there's an evaluation process that occurs, and there's an appeal process that occurs, and these are checks and balances that have served Idaho since 1889. So I'm not so sure there's a huge problem that we need to fix. So just to recap, I believe that all the elected officials should remain elected. There is merit for a county manager, but that the elected officials do not report to the county manager. The elected official, the county manager, chief deputy, chief administrative officer, whatever you want to call that individual, can be like all the electeds have. We all have a chief deputy. That could be a chief deputy to the commissioner's office. I believe there is merit to that, to maintain some consistency of short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. Yeah, a county of our size and a county that's growing like we are, I believe there is merit to it. That's all I have for you, Mr. Chairman.
If this continues, I will close the meeting. Lock it down. There are people here who want to ask questions. We're going to allow that. Bob, do you have any questions?
What do you think about a proposal that would have 5?
Can't hear you, sir.
What about a recommendation to have 5 commissioners rather than 3?
You know, we have approximately 175, but we're on our way to 200,000. We're gonna get to 200,000 pretty quickly. You know, I look at Ada and Canyon. Ada County has 500,000 people in it, and they still do it with 3.
Most of those are in the city.
Yes, and the unincorporated area has shrunk, as we will be shrinking too here.
County services serve the cities too.
True. So I don't know. I think right now, I believe 3 is probably a good number. Also, a little bit concerned that right now, with as much as going on in our country, to put this forward, it's going to be a little difficult. I don't know. I just think there's a lot of distrust out there for government, and I'm afraid that even if we put this proposal forward, let's just say for a county manager, I'm thinking a lot of people might just be against it, but I think there is value to that. But I think the more that you put into this in the immediate future is going to be a more difficult sell.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, we all agree with that also,
Yeah.
because we've been assured that whatever we put forward as this group is going to be approved by probably approved by the commissioners.
Right.
And then, of course, everyone in this room that's qualified to vote can either go yes or no. So it isn't like we're ruling the roost here. We're giving the people in this county. But our challenge is to try to put something forward that the voters will, in fact, approve. Right. And that's why we're talking to you and others.
Maybe 3 with a chief deputy will give them a little bit of flexibility. I got to admit, we spend a lot of time on irrelevant minutia with the board. If I have grant monies for a Watersway grant to buy a watercraft, a Sea-Doo or something, well, I have to go, or one of my representatives has to go to the commissioners to say, hey, this is part of a grant that was awarded to the sheriff's office from the Idaho Sheriff Association. It's X amount of dollars for this Sea-Doo. Can we, that kind of administrative stuff, I believe, should be handled at a level that, okay, is the money grant money? Yes. Okay, well, it's grant money, goes over here. Finance director, is grant money available? Yes. Boom. I don't know why we would have to send a representative, put it on an agenda, and do this quite frequently. So.
Can I ask you a question about
Sure.
that? Is it because the commissioners have the kind of the budgetary authority to set the budget? Is that why when, let's say it's grant money for new craft like you described, you need to go to them to say, here it is, this is an increase in budget that's paid for, and they have to do that? Is that part of their role?
That is their role, but I also believe there is a designate, that they can designate, but that I wouldn't be the best person to ask that to, but.
My understanding in the manager role that you described is that manager could be hired. You wouldn't need to change a thing as it exists today, but the legal authorities of that manager would not comprehend perhaps things like you're describing, where just send it to the manager, let him deal with this administrative task, because that is not within the existing structure of government that's contemplated by statute. It's ultimately the commissioners. The managers might be able to set meetings, do things like that, but the ultimate authority for the budget approval has to be those commissioners. They're the last stop. And so kind of delegating that role to a manager might get you so far in terms of talking to you about it, but it might not get you the approval. Maybe you don't have to go to 2 meetings. Maybe it's that meeting with that manager who then takes that package to the board and you never have to meet with them. Maybe that's it. And I deal with this a lot.
Right.
In representing governments where I used to have situations where I had direct contact with those that ran the government. And then as certain people got into the government in lesser roles, they sought to
Sure.
wedge you aside,
Right.
so you lost touch with those that were your direct authorities. And it was disconcerting as an attorney to have that happen, to have your words funneled through someone else. So here, you know, this manager role may only take you so far in terms of.
It may reduce the workload, you know, let's say for the purpose of this conversation, maybe 30%. But, you know, I have spoken to many other of the 44 sheriffs here in Idaho, and they don't handle business in other counties like they handle it here. Once the sheriff or a department head receives their budget from B budget, which is supplies and printer cartridges and what have you, once you have that budget, then that is yours to spend. Here, if I spend too much money on ammunition, but I have some money left in paper, I have to go to the commissioner and say, hey, I got X amount of dollars left over here, and I want to spend it on ammunition. And we have to go to the board, and we have to, you know, ask these things. And so, to me, this is where a county manager says, well, is it within their budget? Yeah, it's within their budget. They're just asking to take it from one area of the budget to another area of the budget.
So it's a bit micromanagement is what you're saying. Once you get your budget, you should be able to spend within your budget and reallocate within it, within a range or something.
The other 43 sheriffs, that's yes.
They have that.
They have that flexibility. For some reason, we do not.
Let me ask you another question.
Brian, your mic's not on.
Oh. Forgive me.
And Brian, let's let some of the others ask questions too.
I won't hog the mic, Dave. But could I ask this one?
Go.
You know of any other sheriffs around the country that are other than elected?
I do not know. And I come from a pretty liberal state, and they're elected.
Okay.
Phil, do you have any questions?
Yes. Sheriff Norris, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And let me say at the beginning, we're fortunate to have someone as qualified as you to be our sheriff. With that in mind, I know all across the country, county sheriffs, by a substantial majority, are elected. Now, I'm sure there are lots of reasons for that. A lot of the county sheriffs tend to be smaller jurisdictions. Some don't have a lot of growth, some do. And perhaps the only advantage, if there is one, to an appointed sheriff is that someone is setting qualifications for that person to be the sheriff. Under our current system, and we have no control over this, is that, you know, we're fortunate you got elected. Someone else could have gotten elected who is not qualified. And the problem with that is once they're elected, both here in Kootenai County and throughout the country, an elected sheriff is very seldom defeated in a re-election campaign. So what I'm asking you, and I don't know if you can help us, what can we do to set some criteria what's required to run for sheriff, or is it just a crapshoot each time that someone runs?
You know,
If you'll hold it down, please allow the questions and the answers.
I kind of evaluated that circumstance when our elected officials from a department head standpoint were elected. And, you know, we have Steve Matheson, which as a treasurer, and he's a pretty talented guy. I mean, he serves because he wants to serve the community. We have Barry McHugh, he's a very, very competent attorney. Would probably make 5 times as much in the private sector, but He wants to serve his community. So, you know, I think that this might get a little bit of rousing from the crowd, but I think that there has something to be said for people who don't need this job as employment, that we do it because we want to. Yeah. We saw, you know, I mean, I'm very much of a fan of Ronald Reagan, who did have, you know, he was a governor, and then of course our citizen President Donald Trump. They did a pretty darn good job for not having experience in the field. So.
Tamara, any questions?
Of course. On that July 14th meeting, Commissioner Brooks equated your position to be the same as a city police chief. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, there's many things that are different from an elected county sheriff versus a police chief, and we can go back into time to discuss and evaluate what the roles of a sheriff are, but certainly in the times that we're currently living in, that making sure that you're not your rights are not compromised, making sure that you have due process, and there are certain processes and certain mandates or laws that are being presented, and when those processes aren't present, a sheriff does have the right to say, well, wait a minute, where is this Fourth Amendment protection here against somebody who's not doing anything wrong? So yeah, there is a significant, a police chief really serves at depending on how the charter is written for that municipality, serves at the pleasure of a city manager, a mayor, or city council.
That's right.
But, and that they get their direction from the police chief. I get my direction from these people.
So if your position were to become appointed, would those powers, I guess, that you just stipulated, would those then no longer apply, or would they still apply, but maybe just in a different form?
Oh, it would be at the direction of who you report to. Yeah, it would be at the direction of either the Board of Commissioners or a county manager, if that elected were to report to that individual.
As in, if that position was
yes,
appointed?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Bruce, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Sheriff Norris, for being here tonight. Just real quick, the way I kind of gather from what you've said earlier is that many of the problems are kind of with the BOCC, more so than the elected officials. And could you say that that the BOCC has affected some of the other elected positions, similarly like how it's affected the sheriff's office?
Oh, absolutely.
In an adverse way?
Oh, absolutely. We work on an operating system with all of our sheriff applications, law enforcement applications, that's 30 years old. Now, if you're in the IT world, it's end of life. It's going to cost us millions of dollars to get a different program. I have a building that's about this size, that's full of records and paperwork. I haven't seen that in 20 years. Generally, what happens in modern day law enforcement, once this report is scanned, once it's copied and scanned, that's the permanent record for that event. And I have, and then that's backed up on a daily basis. I have a room about this size full of records and paperwork that shouldn't even be, I should be able to use that as office space, but it's full of paper. These are just some of the things that I believe that if we had a county manager or we had some sort of consistency within the board, that we might be able to address. But this software operating system is a big one. It's almost end of life. But there's no planning to make sure those applications. Right now, I have a $125,000 item that I will likely return because I can't get it to work with our operating system. But these are just some of the things that I believe a county manager could bring some consistency to and help educate the commissioner and say, no, you know what? Minimum jail standards are 2 meals a day, 2 hot meals a day. We really should provide 2 hot meals a day. That hopefully they can help influence these things.
Thank you.
Joan, any questions?
Yes. Could you talk a little bit more about how you see the county manager, should that person be, should this commission make that recommendation, how they would interface and work with the electeds?
So I believe that a vast majority of the day-to-day budget operations could be handled, designated to the chief deputies or in that particular case, a county manager, CAO, or chief deputy, whatever you want to call this individual. And then on the items that can't be handled at that particular level, then we move those things up to the electeds to make a decision on. But I believe that there is merit to a county manager for those 3 offices to coordinate what they need to do as far as it pertains to minimum jail standards that we have to meet, to solid waste that we have to meet. And these are projections that have to be put on the table at some point in time. You know, another example about county commissioners is that this is a contention of mine, if you can tell. So we recently spent taxpayer money on a building called Kootenai Electric. And then the decision was made that that building doesn't really meet our needs for this new justice building. So we're going to spend now upwards of $25 million on this other building. Sometimes I'm confused with some of the long-term strategies of our boards. If that Kootenai Electric didn't meet our needs, but we're all bleeding because we can't hire people, because you can make more being a cook at Panda Express than being a control room operator at the Kootenai County Jail. Yeah. So I'm very perplexed at this this new building that we want to build, or that the commissioners want to build, but we already bought one that doesn't meet our needs. So that's just another example where I believe that maybe a coordinated effort, that somebody that went to school for a municipality, a municipality, a county, or a city, that has a little bit of knowledge in law enforcement, a little bit of knowledge in assessing, a little bit of knowledge in that, might help the county out. But I want to stress, I do not believe that any of the electeds should report to that county manager.
Thank you.
Bryant?
I know you haven't been in your position that long, but you did mention, so this is sort of a historical question, but you may have some insight because you probably studied some of this to some extent. You noted that the Board of Commissioners has commissioned some salary studies in the past and then simply ignored whatever the salary studies indicated they would maybe be advisable. Do you have any idea why they commission these studies and then don't act on them?
Well, they would be a better one to answer that question, but I asked that question. It was asked today in a meeting. But perhaps that a county manager would be able to say, hey, we know you're going to be a county employee and you're not going to work for Spokane and you're not going to work for the city of Coeur d'Alene, you're not going to work for Spokane County. You are never going to be the highest Kootenai County employee in whatever field you're in. But let's keep you within 7%. Let's keep you within 6%. Come up with a number. So then there's a strategy that can be used. I have seen municipalities do that. I've had them say, hey, guess what? If you're here for the money, this is the wrong place to be. If you're here to serve the community and be a part of a great organization, we want you here, but you're going to be making about 6% less than your brothers in blue down the street. I think that's a viable option. Why they don't follow it, why we have a 9-year matrix and other police departments have a 6-year matrix, I don't know. Give me a 7-year, or actually it's a 5. So give me a 6. Give me a 6-year. I'll take care of the other 1 year, but just get me close. But they just haven't in the past. This board, however, is closer than we've ever been. So, yeah.
Kurt, can you hear me? Do you have any questions?
I can and I do. Thank you.
Fire away.
I wanted to follow up on your citation of spending $150,000 on in the first 3 years of a new deputy. At least that's the way I interpreted your statement.
Yes.
Would you expect that training expenditure how much would you expect that to drop off if the deputy was to stay for additional years?
I'm not so, can you rephrase the question or?
Yeah.
So if in the first 3 years of a deputy's tenure with the department, you spend an average of $50,000 in training in those first 3 years, if they were to say, persist in their role for an additional 3 years for a total of 6, what would you expect the expenditure to be in the second 3 years?
Well, your highest expenses are recruitment and the academy. And then from the academy, we equip every deputy sheriff with everything that he or she needs. So you're in about that $100,000 range at that point. And then.
So that's for onboarding somebody to get them through the academy and on the street.
Correct, about 120. Yep.
Okay.
And then we have to put this individual per Idaho Post Peace Officer Standard Training. We have to put this person with a training officer for approximately 4 months. So that we pay that training officer. We expend additional training such as pullover and approach and domestic violence and other areas that we have to continue to train that person on. So the first 3 years is really your biggest expense, and that's when you have a fully trained deputy sheriff who's plug and play. I'm going to go out there and protect the community and not get myself hurt. It takes about 3 to 4 years for a patrol deputy. It takes about 2 years for a deputy assigned to our jail.
Okay, thank you.
Kristen, can you hear us? Do you have any questions? Kristen? If you've got a question, Kristen, we can't hear you. You need to unmute.
I think I just did. Thank you. I was trying to show you scenery and not me, so. I don't actually have a question. I guess I have a comment because both the sheriff and Brian referenced sheriffs around the country. I have been doing a lot of research on counties all through the U.S. who have different forms and who have gone through a change. And I will say that when it comes to the sheriff, I have not found any areas in which the sheriff is anything but elected. And it's my understanding that the exceptions are when you have kind of a combination county, metropolitan district. So there's not really a distinction. So in that way, it's run more like a city. So just to tell Brian, for your edification, and I think Bob referenced it too, I guess I could almost safely say it's a non-issue because there are no sheriffs that are appointed around the country to speak of. Regarding county managers, Bruce, I don't, just take, don't take, I'm sorry. I've got a phone going here too. Regarding the county managers, I have spoken to a lot of them, and I think a lot of the points that you made, Sheriff Norris, are spot on in terms of what a manager can do for the whole process. And that's all I have to say.
So on that point, I wondered why in Portland, why the county sheriff wasn't going into the city of Portland to say, okay, the buck stops with me and we're not going to allow this nonsense to occur. And the reason why he or she did not do that was because the prosecutor had come out to say that I am not going to prosecute any riot-related criminal offense. So the sheriff said, well, I'm not going to jeopardize the safety of my deputies. Now, there is an appointed sheriff now in King County, Washington, where the politicians there finally decided, you know what, in fact, I think it takes effect this year, that we do not want a elected county sheriff in King County, which encompasses Seattle, to be elected, so they are going to appoint. Also in Delaware, I believe in Delaware, there's a couple of counties where they were stripped of their county sheriffs, and they're resigned to a civil process and I think the jail, and they're not allowed to exert any type of power outside those two entities.
Yeah, I don't have my notes in front of me. There are actually 4 states that do not have a sheriff's association. Hawaii is one of them, Alaska, and then 2, I think, in the Northeast. Delaware might be one of them. So they do have a different situation there. And granted, these large areas like the Seattles and the Portlands where there's been so much difficulty, those are very left-leaning blue states and cities, and that's where the exceptions are. But for the most part, across the country, the sheriff is pretty solidly elected by the people.
I would agree.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. David, can you hear us? Do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Sherry, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Bob?
None.
Phil?
Sheriff Norris, let me ask you one thing more. An elected sheriff, any place, it's a pretty powerful position. I mean, not only you get elected, you have the people support you, carry a gun, but I say that kind of in jest, yeah, okay.
I tell my wife that every night, and she says, take out the trash and wash the dishes.
I hear you, believe me.
I don't understand where the power thing comes from.
I go through the same sort of thing. But because of that, you can be almost totally independent. You've got 4-year gap between you get elected, run again, and so on. So my question is, during that 4-year period, apart from your going to different civic meetings and so on, what does the department do for outreach so that the citizens generally have a good feel of what the police department is doing, not just that you're arresting people on the street?
Right, yep. So I'm a big fan of town hall meetings. I do hold town hall meetings. I am a big fan of citizen advisory committees, and I'm a big fan of clergy council. So I have a clergy council. We had some difficulty filling some positions, so we are starting our citizen advisory committees in the end of September. And I do town hall meetings throughout the community. I recently did one at the waterways because I wanted to hear directly from the constituents, the people who live on the river, what the problems were or were not. And it was standing room only on that event, but I'm a big fan of reaching out to the community and listening to what the needs, concerns of the community are and what their experiences have been with the sheriff's office.
Questions?
You mentioned dealing with the mayors and that it seems like in your current position that you have the ability to work through problems, deal with some of the issues. What I'm hoping for is a little bit of clarification. Do you think that would change if your position became appointed? That you would no longer be able to work or at that level with those certain other city officials?
Yeah, no, you would be taking direction from various different city managers or mayors at that point. So it would make things more complex. Yes.
Bruce?
Yes. You had mentioned that you think that the existing form of government should remain the same. And yet you'd mentioned a number of problems that you've noticed in county government. So is it safe to assume that you don't see this as a structural issue, but more so a people issue?
I believe that there is merit for a county manager. I believe that to manage the 3 offices of the commissioners, yes, I do. As far as individual personalities, whoever has the majority of that 3-member board would, just like a city manager, if you've got a 5-member council, and if you've got 3 people that believe that the individual is not taking the direction that the commissioner or the city council wants that city manager to take, then that city manager can be removed. So it's the same concept. So I believe that there's benefits to a county manager. As far as the personality-wise and what have you, that's going to exist in this form or a city form.
Okay, thank you.
Joan?
Yes, quick question. To your knowledge, has there been any wage studies in this current setting of commissioners?
2018, I believe,
Was the last one?
Yeah. 2020? 2019.
Okay, and was that a wage study of law enforcement or across the board?
The whole county.
The whole county. Okay, thanks.
Brian? Brian?
Quickly, what was that operating system that you were talking about that's 30 years old?
Spillman.
Spillman, is it?
It's owned by Motorola now.
Unique to the sheriff's department, or is that?
No, it's a pretty widely used, yeah.
I mean, it's cross department throughout the county?
Oh, throughout the county, throughout the nation, yeah. That's a whole nother talk show. With Motorola buying Spillman, and then they felt like they were going to go in a different direction, but now they're not going to go in that direction. But that's our law enforcement operating system, is this Spillman event. We run everything off of Spillman.
Is it the same system that was referenced when the clerk came in and said they had a very old system that they were operating under?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Right, but same concept as far as needing to update and needing a newer system. And coincidentally, even our payroll system that we use on the sheriff's office, it's not automated. We fill out pieces of paper, and we have staff that spends all of about 2 days. That every pay period ending, and we're writing stuff in. So.
Are your HR issues handled in the sheriff's department or through the prosecutor?
No, through the prosecutor's office we have our own HR department. We handle certain administrative violations, but anything, policies of equality and equity generally are referred to the human resources.
Thank you.
Kurt, any questions?
Yes, thanks. I wanted to ask why you think that a city manager, or county manager rather, would provide consistency when at the same time you pointed out that they serve at the pleasure of the majority of the Board of Commissioners. It seems like with the turnover that happens frequently amongst the county commissioners, that the manager would then be subject to potentially the same degree of charge.
Well, I think to start with, we as a county, we should, in fact, let me show it to you real quick. Everybody want to see the strategic plan for Kootenai County as it pertains to services and law enforcement? Yes. Want to see it? Yes. Okay. It's right over there. Do you see it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, one doesn't exist. One does not exist. So do I believe that we should have a strategic plan to involve all of our current elected officials, to involve town hall meetings with the community on what services they expect, and to put in this one document that we can all refer to that says, well,
Apologies for that.
do I believe that we should have a strategic plan that we can refer to and that county manager can refer commissioners that say, well, if the county is at 175 right now, and we're expected to be 225 by 2026, and we're expected to be 300 by this is what we need to do to keep pace with our services for this county. And having a document like that would help some people in government to be able to suggest, well, this is the revenue that we're going to need to sustain this growth. So yeah, that's I do believe that there would be value in that, but the cities run with that type of operation constantly. If
I understand the benefits of having a strategic plan, especially if it spanned the breadth of all the elected positions. The problem is that by statute, there is no mandate to have a strategic plan, even if you have the manager form in place.
Well, there's no mandate, but I think it's certainly a good idea to have one. I mean, we actually should have one on the sheriff's office for what our projected growth.
But we should have it regardless of whether we have a manager, I think.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, absolutely agreed. But I think with the plan, then the county manager can educate and help educate that commission, say, well, the reason why we need to do this, this, and this is because of this. We don't have a lot of luck in having an open dialogue with some of the commissioners on some of our needs. But maybe somebody who understands that, went to school specifically for these different entities within a municipality and the value of a strategic plan, maybe they would have a better luck. But right now, we just are not seeing that. So.
Wouldn't you be at potentially even higher risk, though, if the county manager decided they did not like the sheriff and chose to obstruct anything the sheriff wanted to try to do?
Well, I don't believe that any elected should report to the county manager. But as far as making any decisions because of a dislike for law enforcement or what have you, we have that risk now. And it may exist now with commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
Kristen, any questions?
Just one final comment. Thank you, Sheriff Norris, for coming. I happen to live in the county, so I am thrilled every time I see one of your deputies driving down Riverview Drive. So thank you very much for all that you do.
Thank you.
David, any questions?
No, thank you.
Sherry, any questions?
No, thank you, and thank you for presenting.
Thank you.
Shall we go around again? Do we have any questions down there? Okay, Bob, any questions?
Just thanks for showing up tonight. Good to see you.
You too,
Phil?
Bob.
Tamara?
I want to go back onto your control versus efficiency statement. I believe it was Commissioner Filios who said that the county is run fairly inefficiently, and the best way to have a more efficient county government is to have the electeds be appointed. There was a control statement in there. Obviously, from what you're saying, I know you don't agree with that. So what, in your opinion, besides a county manager, is there anything else that can make this county run more efficiently?
You know, in reviewing the sheriff's office budget, and when you take into account, yeah, do I have the largest budget? Absolutely, I do. Do law enforcement agencies throughout this country generally consume the largest portion of any municipality's budget? Absolutely, it does. But when you take salary, benefits, jail operations, minimum jail standards, equipment to and from court for mandated services, and civil subpoena process is a mandate for us. When you take all of that, I have a very, very small discretionary budget. Very small. Our patrol responsibility is growing. The mental health here in this county is beyond anything I've ever seen. I've worked stations 3 times the size of 175,000 people, but we are getting suicide threats, people wanting to harm themselves, kill themselves per shift every day. This is not just once or twice a week, every shift. So I am going to tell the commissioners that, yes, be prepared. I'm going to be coming for patrol deputies next budget season. They cut 4 of them out for me this year. The city of Coeur d'Alene got 4 of them. I got 0. So we are in a need coming the next budget season.
Bruce, any questions?
No questions, just.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Is there anything outside of your department that, because you work with all the other elected officials, is there anything outside your department that could increase those efficiencies?
You know, from what I have seen, I have not seen this over budgeted sheriff's office. I haven't got to any other county departments. I've been a little busy on my own, but yeah, I just do not see it. Are we making small cuts? Have I told the deputies that, hey, we're not buying backup guns anymore? These are, smaller cuts that I can make. There's certain minimum requirements that I have to buy X amount of rounds of ammunition because we have to qualify X amount of times and we have to train X amount of times. The discretionary portion of my budget in this growing county, it is tough to cut. I mean, if we were not one of the fastest growing counties in the nation, maybe we could cut more. But anybody who is going to run for office here in Kootenai County and say that, hey, I'm pro-gun and I want to cut your taxes, they're not being a leader because we are growing. Our roads, we see the infrastructure on our roads. We see the stress in our schools. We see school levies that are being put on the ballot every measure. We're a growing county, and our infrastructure is way behind.
Bruce?
No questions, just thank you very much for coming out tonight.
Joan? Bryant?
Thank you.
Brian?
No, thanks.
Thank you.
Go back around. Kurt?
Nothing else, thank you.
Kristen?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
David?
No, thanks.
Sherry?
No, thank you.
Do we need to go around again, Tamara?
Why don't we just go to Tamara?
That's why I asked
Okay.
Tamara to start with. Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Thank you. Thank
We
you.
appreciate your coming.
Thank you. Thank you for your support. Appreciate it.
Take a break. Just about seven. It's just a few minutes before 7. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break at this point. We'll reconvene about 7:05. Next item on the agenda is to discuss the following meetings. September 22nd, we have, I believe, 4 or 5 people, right, Nancy?
That was actually one of my questions for the group tonight, is right now, Dan English has confirmed he's willing to come, Sylvia Proud, and Jill Smith, I know. There's one other, I think I had it in the email, or it was in the minutes, was that what it was?
No, it was in the email.
So my question was, right now, we had talked about doing Sylvia Proud and Nancy Pluff together. Do you still want both of those? We have Jill Smith, Dan English, and Leanna. Do we want to bring in, 4 people, 5 people, 6 people on the 22nd? We kind of took David Callahan and Stephen Kiergaard off the list at that point because they hadn't been available earlier in the month. So just making sure that you want to move forward with the ones that are scheduled, or do we want any changes?
Any discussion?
Since we still have kind of October 6th as open, available, I'm not sure we want to have 4 or 5 people in one meeting. Because we don't know if they're going to have presentations, and I would like to be able to have them be able to give whatever time they feel they need for their presentation. If we could maybe divvy that up and bump some out to the 6th. I know we talked about being done by it, but we're literally only talking about 2 or 3 people. That if we put them out to the 6th, then we're not having a very long meeting on the 22nd.
Depends really on
that sounds good.
on how much each one of them has to say.
Yeah,
But there's no way to know that.
I think I like her suggestion.
Anyone else?
The suggestion is we divvy up the amount of people that were on the 22nd and have some of them on the 22nd, 2, 3 of them, and then the other 2 or 3 on October 6th. Because the 29th is the public comment. That way we don't have.
I think that sounds good.
No one else? Okay. How do we want to break it up?
I can, let's say if we're agreed on those 6, I can reach out to the 6 and see what dates are better for them. Unless there's a specific order you'd like them in.
Let them decide then. Is that agreeable with everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go forward with that. Any disagreements over here?
I guess, David, is one other person Leanna, did I hear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll add Leanna to the list, what we have on the minutes today, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Let's do that then. It sounds like that's the agreement. I contact them, give them the choice of the 22nd or the 6th. Try and get, I think we have 5 people, if I got the count right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, you said somebody besides Jill, and
Yeah,
then
maybe it was just it. Maybe it was just the 5.
So we have at least 5.
At least.
So let's, if we can, let's shoot for 3 on the 22nd and 2 on the 6th.
Got it.
I don't know that we can get that way, but let's hopefully shoot for that.
Either or.
Okay. That sounds good for the 22nd. 29th is a public comment meeting. We have some potential forms here you can take a look at. I believe everyone had some at their spaces here. The optional forms of government study commission public comment sheet. Does it look like anybody has any issues with that? Brian?
Mike?
In legal practice, we speak of leading questions. When you ask somebody, I wish to support the following, generally that's considered a leading type of a question. I would suggest something more neutral. It doesn't strike me right now what that would be, but I just think that's kind of a leading way of saying something.
Go to a more generic comment?
Yes.
We can absolutely do that. So just so you understand, this form is modified from our budget, and so normally what we have is I support the following, and it's like APD budget, county budget, or I wish to speak on these three. So we can definitely, I wish to comment on the following, or, share the following comments with the public record or something like that.
Possibly just a single word comment
Yeah.
or comments.
Comments, yeah, with more space on the back.
Yeah.
So my.
Single word?
To introduce that section. So what we would do is, my understanding from last time was to have the, I liked the idea, if you are all in agreement of having the sign up at that door and this door with odd and even numbers. And then, maybe we'll sign up 100 people. I don't know if we would get to 100 in that time period, but, or 75 or whatever that looks like. Enough to fill the time. And then we would hand out the comments in the room for those who wish to just submit written comments, who maybe didn't, especially once those signups are done. Does that sound?
The only problem I have with that is we've already said we're going to end about 8 o'clock. And based on 3 minutes per person, we're only looking at maybe 50 people being able to speak. If we put signups for 100 people, I think some people would be disappointed that they signed up but weren't able to speak.
And you may have some that do a minute, and that, so it might get done a little shorter. I don't think that, in my experience, anyone who speaks for 1 minute, someone else, maybe we had an audio issue and their 3 minutes got interrupted, we give them extra time, or, it would allow us some, flexibility in there if we do about 50, 60, whatever that group is.
I would suspect about 60 might be a good number.
Is that a good number?
Anybody differ?
Okay.
Unfortunately, public comment comes on the 29th.
You don't have a First Amendment right
We
here
can.
with that man.
And then if I can ask, as long as you're talking about future meetings, if we can put an agenda item on one of the upcoming meetings to talk about the minutes for the group. This group will be taking back over, kind of all of the minute writing. So with, David is your secretary. So just to kind of put on the record, if you want him to write the minutes completely, or if during deliberations, if you want him to be able to participate fully and perhaps have someone else write minutes, or what that may look like. I've been asked to have that as a future discussion item on the agenda.
That's fair.
So.
I agree. Let's see, today's the 15th. Let's put that on the agenda for the 22nd.
Yeah, perfect.
We need to deal with that sooner than the 29th.
Yes.
The 6th will be too late.
Yes.
So Nancy, along with taking minutes, what about the agenda preparation, publication process?
Because that has to be on the county website, it will have to be done through staff. My thought is you will probably end up working with Chandra in our office, because she does all of the agendas for those groups who don't have county staff associated. So I will verify that with her, but likely the chair will work with her in the future to make sure that they get posted properly here.
Okay. The change then to the comment sheet, we can go forward with that. Everyone's in agreement? The sign-up list, anybody have any issues with the format of the sign-up list?
And I verified with staff, we will have additional BOCC staff here that night to help at the door and such, at least till the meeting starts.
Okay. Sounds good. We are now looking at potentially no longer going dark on the 6th. Nancy will set whatever individuals into that schedule makes sense for us. We'll learn that as we go along. The 13th, we will have the report by the subcommittee who has been looking at the various alternates, I shouldn't say alternates, the various other locations where they have done different things than what we have. Kristen is heading that. She will bring that report to us at that time.
And that's all we have on that day, correct?
No, I want to make a change to that day and add something, and that is that Kristen has brought to my attention that she has spoken with someone, I believe the name was David Childs. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Yeah.
David Childs, that she thinks would contribute.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Kristen. She thinks would contribute to that, and so I would like to suggest that we try to add David Childs to this 13th. along with Kristen. I'm sorry?
Who is he?
He is, he's the individual, did you send out his stuff to everyone or just to me?
No, I only sent it to you.
No,
He is,
no, what I was talking about, Kristen, is I received his resume quite a while back, and I wasn't sure whether it went to the entire group or whether it just came to me at that time.
Was that
oh,
his?
good point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the individual that contacted us early on, sent his resume out at that time.
Okay, everyone should have it. If they don't, I'll look and make sure I've got it.
Okay. David Childs has a background in both county and city government as a county manager, as a city manager in various locations. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Kristen, jump in.
He was also the past president of the International City County Management Association. So he has a lot of background information because as the past president, obviously this is an international, primarily U.S. organization. Yeah. So he's had hands-on experience in various roles, but as he advanced in his chosen career, then he also was, I don't know what the mechanism was, how he became the president, but probably moved up and was active in the organization and moved up in it. So he has a breadth of information and an interesting perspective.
Any discussion on the idea of bringing David Childs in on the 13th to supplement the report?
He could provide good input from the whole professional perspective and interaction with government and so on. So, I don't know if I agree with him, but I think it's worth listening to.
Is he hunting for a job? You say he sent you his resume.
He sent the resume to us to discuss, to give us testimony.
He said
He really liked the
Pardon?
sheriff.
he sent it a while back to all of us.
Okay, I'll have to look back at that.
Better take the shots where you can, Bruce.
Yeah, it was very early in our process that came in.
Okay, I don't remember that, but
I don't recall having seen it either.
Further discussion? Anybody opposed to bringing him in?
where did this job experience take place?
Kristen, do you remember where he worked?
Minnesota, Utah, I think he was in Texas for a while. This is really off the top of my head, Tamara. I'm not sitting here looking at it. Basically, as Dave said, originally submitted information, I think, to the Board of Commissioners, and somehow it got to our attention. When I say our, that's the editorial hour. It did not get to mine. What happened is that only recently did he reach out to me because he was trying to contact somebody and share the fact that he had a perspective and is a resident of Kootenai County now. And I could appreciate if I had expertise and a topic was being discussed, that I would want to at least make people aware of it. So he made me aware. I sent it to, we have this little subcommittee, so I sent it to Bob Fish and to Phil, and also to Dave, just to see if what they thought. Bob and Phil and I met with him briefly to kind of go over what his background was. And then I brought it to Dave's attention and said, this might be someone who is of interest.
So he's a current Kootenai County resident, but the job experience did not occur in Kootenai County. Am I understanding that correctly?
No.
Okay.
Right, absolutely. It did not, he was never an employee of Kootenai County. He, at the point that he came here, he was the president, I think, and again, I might have my timeline wrong, but he was the president of the International County City Management Association. And he still is active in the sense of I think it's in a retired mode. Perhaps he consults with them. I don't know. You would have to ask him those details. He made us aware of a number of articles and publications through that organization, which were helpful in our research. But he can probably answer direct questions from folks a little bit more professionally, you might say, than I can. You know, I've done the best I could to gather the information, but I was not, just like I was a healthcare administration professional, and I can answer all sorts of questions on that, but I was not a county, city management professional. And they do have a profession. It is one that has ethics, and he can talk to you about that. For example, I'll just kind of give you a little tidbit. If you hire a manager who is part of that organization, they cannot participate in any partisan politics. They cannot donate to a party. They have to stay neutral. So it's kind of like, I mean, I don't know the legal profession. I do know healthcare. We have standards that we have to follow, and if we don't follow them, regardless of whether our bosses would say we failed, nations can say that we failed. So this is a group of, if we would, in Kootenai County, hire a county manager, you would want to pull someone who had the professional credentials. We would want to, we would hope that that's who the Board of Commissioners would hire.
Would it be asking too much just to have the resume distributed to everyone so they could at least see it?
No, I think that's a great idea, Bruce. I think that's what Dave was saying. Get it to everybody.
Do you have easy access to that, or do you need Kristen to resend it to you?
If I don't have a copy, I will reach out to Kristen.
Okay.
Oh, I can send it.
Okay, Kristen, go ahead and send it to Nancy to simplify things for her, and then she can bounce it out to the entire commission.
I'll do that tomorrow morning, Nancy.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay.
And then since we have a couple of weeks, we don't need to make a decision on this tonight.
No, we can look at that on the 22nd. Is that agreeable with everyone?
Yeah.
Table it to the 22nd?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds fascinating.
Then the 20th, we will begin deliberations anticipated. Okay.
Okay.
So can I, Dave, can I raise one point that we haven't touched on specifically with the topics that we need to cover between now and starting deliberations? But when we began our adventure together, we chose officers for the interim period of the collecting information phase. And one of the tasks we have is to decide on our officers for the deliberation phase.
I don't remember that structure. Brian? He thinks that, he's saying that we, when we selected officers, it was for the information gathering phase only.
It was the discussion of the rotating chair, and it was discussed that at some point, if we felt like we needed to have another discussion at that point, if there's a possibility of having a rotating chair, that we would come back to it, and I think that's what he's alluding to.
Kurt, is that true? You're talking about the rotating chair?
Yeah, it was either the rotating chair or it was the point of having interim officers, and I believe that we had selected the officers for an interim period to start with the information collection phase.
We did select interim officers, and then when we had the bylaws, we selected the officers at that point. They don't believe there was anything interim about that selection.
That's, Dave, that's what I remember too. They were interim, and we had the bylaws, and became permanent. And I don't remember any discussion about changing again further on down the road, but with all due respect to you, why we change horses in the middle of the stream? You know, you're just the coordinator of the meeting, so I'd say leave it as is, and let's continue on and come up with what the public can either say we reject, we accept.
And you know, Phil, I agree with that, because Dave would like to change horses midstream with respect to the alternates being able to participate in the deliberation.
Not changing horses, that's just cutting
Well,
certain.
that's cutting people out of the process.
It is, and that's something we can discuss when it comes up on the agenda.
So, and that was my question too. I apologize I wasn't here last week, but I did review the YouTube video, and I seem to recall that alternate discussion is coming up on the agenda. Is that correct, for a vote?
It will. I'm anticipating probably the 13th. We couldn't do it before the 29th because it has to be out in everyone's hands for 2 weeks. The 6th, we were talking about going dark. Now we're going to be bringing just a couple of people in. I would anticipate it probably be on the 13th agenda.
Because I sent you an email and copied Nancy on it, and just for whatever it's worth, I think there's value in the alternates participating in some fashion. I understand the timeline of the roughly 10 minutes and how that might be an issue, but if the alternates could be given a lesser amount of time, maybe 3 or 4 minutes to speak, if we have something valuable to say, I think it's important to allow us to continue with the process.
Can we actually designate a date for this discussion? Perhaps we have a discussion on the 6th and then have a vote on the 13th, for example. I think it's also worth revisiting and having a discussion about the rotating chair, at least to discuss it.
Well, the rotating chair was not in the bylaws. However, what is in the bylaws is if you are dissatisfied with the work I've been doing, you are free to remove me as the chair, and I will just be a single member, and you can then appoint a different chair. Anytime you want to, Kurt. Go ahead, Brian.
I'll just table it for the discussion we're going to have on this at the next meeting.
The microphone didn't work.
When you hold it up to the ear as well.
I said I'll table my comment until the meeting when we're going to discuss it, so we can get the hell out of here.
Thank you.
Any further discussion before we move to adjourn? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Bob Fish has moved to adjourn.
Second.
Brian Cleary seconds. Adjourn. We are adjourned.
Night, everyone.
We can see.
Night.
Dave,